Hi, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're watching from. My name is Ryan Selvey, and we are with James Bonanno, and we're excited to be looking at some Premiere and After Effects workflows today and making some really cool stuff. Thank you for joining us on Adobe Live. If you want to join the Adobe Live community, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Adobe Live on Instagram for the latest streams, updates, and more. Hello to everybody that's in the chat. Hello to Voodoo Val. Thank you for being our moderator today. And also hello to Christopher Lindstrom. And then over on Behance, we also have people coming in the chat, and it's good to see you guys like Oliver and Rob and Paloma. Nice to see you, Steve and Jack. Thank you guys so much for being here. And James, do you just want to kind of start off and introduce yourself and what you're all about?
Yeah, man. Well, Ryan, thanks for having me on here. It's so good to be back with you on Adobe Live. And for those that have not seen me on here hosting and a guest in the past, I guess a little introduction is in order. Like Ryan said, my name is James Bonanno. I'm a professional creative director, filmmaker, video editor, photographer. And I just wanted to sort of keep my website up, which is still sort of a little bit broken at parts. So don't judge me here if it's not fully complete if you guys are watching at home. But I do run a travel agency, travel company with my wife, Anna McNaught, who many of you on the Adobe team know. And this is us in our van. We have traveled the world, traveled all around the US in a camper van, working with tourism boards, working with different travel companies as professional content creators. And for me, primarily on the filmmaking and the video editing side. If you want to learn more about working with us in the future, check out our portfolio here. Learn about some of our travels and the clients we've worked with, and we also have a YouTube channel over here where I upload not as regularly as I would like to upload, but I do upload at least a handful of times every couple months, travel films, tutorials, things like that. But the other tutorials and the tips that hopefully you'll be learning today primarily happen over on Behance, and as Ryan said, here on Adobe Live. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. Ryan, is there any other sort of housekeeping that we want to talk about before we dive into what we're going to be going over today?
No, I'd love to hear what you kind of have planned for us and seeing kind of your process in your traveling cinematography and
Sweet,
kind of
man.
seeing where this goes. I know
Cool,
that
man.
you quit your job back in 2019 and have been traveling ever since. Did you travel a lot when you were young, or are you making up for lost time now?
um, I guess I'm making up for a little bit of lost time. Like I traveled when I was younger, but not in the capacity that I do now.
Right.
Just for some context, we lived in Los Angeles for about 6 years. That's where Anna and I met, and I was working more on the corporate side of production. I worked for a TV network for a long time, editing a lot of their on-air promos, and then I moved over to the technology world. So I worked for Verizon as their in-house video producer. So a lot of different backgrounds of like doing the professional work at a corporate level. And the entire time I was doing that, I was really looking for more. I mean, I loved my experiences there, but I always wanted to work for myself. I always wanted to move outside the realm of just working for a company. And I really wanted to take that passion for traveling and sort of mesh it with my passion of filmmaking, photography, and creating content. So I eventually, the scales tipped and we were able to actually, quit both of our 9-to-5 jobs and work for ourselves, which was very scary to say the least. Yeah, it's definitely the dream. And there were some ups and downs, and we ended up leaving Los Angeles, buying a van sort of at the time, like pre-COVID, before van life blew up the way it has blown up now, and decided, well, if we're not going to stay in LA and we're going to try to work for ourselves, then let's, move back closer to family, which is here on the East Coast. And yeah, so for the better part of 2.5 years, pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, we traveled out of this van, working from the road, which had its hurdles, but overall, it was an amazing experience. And I still continue to travel for work now, just a little bit more part-time while we're here in the studio. So yeah, a lot of fun adventures, a lot of fun adventures coming up. And today we'll be pulling in some footage from some of those, but some new footage. I've shared footage from Bora Bora in Iceland on here before, so I wanted to freshen it up a little bit, do something a little bit different.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what we're working on today, and I'm excited to see the content that you're kind of bringing in.
Thanks. Yeah. So today, if you can see by the thumbnail, we're talking about how to create some like vintage looking content for your videos, for Instagram Reels. I tend to like to talk about some of the short form content on here because it's something that I'm trying to push a little bit more with my work. It's no surprise that, Reels and this short form video content is just completely taking over in terms of TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. It's no longer just a nice to have. It's sort of like a must. If you're going to be a content creator, you have to find a way to create content cinematically or not. And I'm still of the belief that the content should feel polished and professionally done. I know a lot of people, watch content just for the content itself and don't really care that much about what the production quality and the production value is. But if you're like me and you're nitpicky and kind of a perfectionist, then hopefully this stream will be for you, and it'll give you some insight into how to just, make your content stand out that much more when moving forward. So so basically I've already created a lot of this work, but today we're going to actually start from scratch and we're going to build a couple examples. So the first one I want to show you is something that I put together. This is sort of my backyard, quite literally. It's on the western side of the state. I'm on the East Coast, and a lot of the time I struggle, and I don't know, Ryan, if you're the same way, but I struggle with wanting to have these huge ideas, these big ideas of like, okay, a 40-minute film or a documentary about this, or something that's going to just be very time consuming, but hopefully very rewarding in the end. And a lot of those ideas end up either falling short, or I don't get enough footage of what I wanted, and they end up just getting pushed to the wayside, and you just have all this footage that is just sitting on a hard drive. And I found that in creating more like tentpole content for YouTube, I'm not really posting as much as I would like. I'm not sharing as much of the content as I would like and that I have. So I really want to try to just, me personally, push more of like these short form reels or vignettes, if you will, that highlight some of my cinematography, highlight some of my story, just like a day in the life of, because why not? It's something that I have and we can share, and it doesn't have to be super daunting. And so that's what I want those watching today to take away from this stream is, if you have content on your phone, if you have all this footage that you've shot, but you have no idea what to do with it, this is a great way to sort of repurpose that and make it something that tells a little bit of like a story in a 10 to 15 second time frame.
Yeah, and it's something I also even run into myself is kind of the opposite end also of when you are filming something on location and then you realize you think that you have a lot more, then you get home and then you get mad at yourself as the cameraman and you're like, no, just move to the left. I need the shot when you move to the left.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very frustrating feeling and a balance, and I think over time you just learn from that by shooting more. But the answer is not always just shoot and then do nothing with it. I think you learn the most when you actually start editing things and you realize what your style is and how you want to edit that footage, and it actually makes you a better cinematographer and a filmmaker when you know how to edit the clips that you've shot. So that's sort of the premise of like the first example we're going to do. So we're going to start here. We're going to rebuild this. I'm going to show you how I create sort of like a templated grid. That way we know every single time we're going to get this really cool like 5-layer grid. And I like 5-layer grid or 4 or 3. You can do whatever number you want. But I think if you go any more layers of video clips, you sort of lose the wideness of that clip. So I tend to try to just keep it there. And then we might go over into a little example of kind of, if I play this back real quick.
I'm playing Succession music in my head right now.
Dude, I can hear the doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, or whatever their theme song is. It's so, yeah, it's like starts with that, very Succession, very vintage Super 8. And this is a very, very common thing that we're seeing a lot more of now. I think I don't know how you feel about this too, Ryan, but like the idea of nostalgia and that vintage look is really coming back with a vengeance, because I think we're so used to seeing digital crisp content everywhere. It's like every camera, every phone can shoot 4K, 8K content. And so it's no longer a novelty to just have this beautiful looking footage. It's nice to see something that feels like it's, from the 80s or 90s or even earlier.
Yeah, and actually that's a good segue because Marsha's also in the chat asking what you use to shoot these videos. So obviously you're not taking out these 8 millimeters to shoot these, you're actually shooting them on modern day equipment, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, I am trying to get my hands on a bit of a Super 8 camera to shoot some film. I shoot film photography in my photography work, but I do shoot most of everything that you're going to see today is shot on a Canon C70. So that's my cinema camera that I shoot a lot of my documentary work on. And the idea here was to show both like how to make that cinematic footage that's already cinematic feel even more, and then how to almost like reverse engineer it. So take cinematic footage and like dumb it down and make it look a little bit older and a little bit grittier, pull some of that color and saturation out to make it feel like it was shot on a Super 8 millimeter or 16 millimeter camera.
I'm really interested to see. Obviously, everything works in a cycle, both fashion, both for photo, video, actual clothes, and we've definitely are swinging on the pendulum for the last 10 years of referencing, the 80s and 70s and 60s. Think of like Stranger Things.
Sure.
You see a lot of Gen Z make that. They make it look like a VHS, but also there's even a subset of the next generation that's like making it look like it was recorded on a Motorola Razor.
Yeah, I know. I saw that too. Well, and a lot of people now are just buying, like for different trips, they're buying old razors, they're buying old flip phones, and they're using that as supplemental content for either a campaign or for personal projects, which I think is really cool. And it, again, that can be overdone too. There's like a balance of, okay, is it a trend or is this here to stay? But I think I don't know, the overall idea is that whatever tool you have at your disposal can be used, even if you shot something that you're not happy with on a phone and it's shaky and you're like, oh man, this looks, really, really bad, or I would never use this in a finished product. It can actually be used if you know how to spice it up, add some overlays, add some texture to it, and make it look like it was intentionally done that way.
Yeah. I know that I've seen people at concerts holding up DSs and
Yeah.
camcorders from 2008. And I'm like, oh man, we used to fight so hard to make it look like you weren't filming with that. And now
I
people are
know.
working so hard to make it look like you are filming with it.
I know. I'm like, what the heck? I just crazy, crazy. One day we're just gonna all be holding up like iPads the way people do now, but that'll be vintage. So the time is now. This is the way we're gonna operate and try to do things. So yeah, so let's get started and hop right into Premiere, which you guys already have open here on your screen. And real quick, I just want to breeze through what I have here in the bins. So if you've watched some of my streams before, you know that I'm a pretty big advocate of organization and organizing your clips, no matter the size of the project. It could be one reel or it could be a documentary for a client. It starts on the ground level, and if you don't have a good process of how to organize your clips, you are going to lose that media and not be able to find it when you need it most. So I always organize things by sequences first. You'll notice I have this like 01 underscore 02 03. That's just my way of keeping things like numerical, so I know exactly where things are, and my sequences are always at the top of my bin. And then inside here, I have my drafts. I have anything linked, which we're going to talk about today inside of After Effects. Any nested sequences, because those end up getting they're everywhere if you start to like nest a sequence, group them together. So I have a whole bin for that. And then my selects folder, which there's nothing in there right now. And then I have my footage. And typically in your footage bin or your raw bin, whatever it is, this is where all of the assets of your video will go. So in this case, I have a bunch of different folders. If we have some time, we may go into a couple more examples, but this is all the footage in here. New Jersey home, which is where I live. And then I have some other folders here as well, so we can source some of this footage. And then I have my audio, and I always have my audio broken out by music, sound effects, and voiceover, if there is any voiceover. Just anything you can do to keep yourself from not going crazy and keep that creative spark alive. Graphics, we're going to talk about this in 1 second here. This is my like grid template. So if I open this up, I've already created a little PNG transparent file inside of Photoshop, and this allows me to see exactly where those clips should go.
Do you save that like on your desktop so that you can just drag it into any project?
I save it inside. This is one thing I wanted to mention too. So if you look at my actual folder, I'm working off of a solid state drive. That's typically, I don't like to cloud my computer with any of these files. So I work off a solid state drive, and I work by date. So I know exact like month and date. So I know where everything is. And then inside of here, I just have 0, 0 and the same sort of format of organization. And the top is where all my project files go. So inside of here, I have my assets, which is a lot of these like cool overlays we're going to talk about today. And then my graphics. So I have this just saved inside this folder. And again, the reason I do that is so everything is linked. And if I were to be editing on someone else's computer, or if I, went somewhere else and I had this hard drive, I don't have all those files saved in a downloads folder somewhere that I've accidentally deleted. Everything is just linked right to that hard drive.
Now, is this a system of files that you kind of have developed on your own, or is it something you brought over from your corporate days?
Kind of a mix of both. I've worked with a lot of editors on, years of projects, and like you learn styles from them, you learn styles that work for yourself. And right now I'm working for a company that there's about 6 editors all in different projects inside of this network system. So it's really important that we all have sort of aligned labeling structure, and it just, you sort of share between other editors, and eventually you find what works best for you. And I think I'm pretty happy with where I've gotten to this point, because for all the other projects I'm in, they stay totally consistent. So that is the folder structure.
And Steve wants to know if you use libraries or Mogerts, or if it's mostly
I do.
All pre-made assets.
I do. I'd be totally honest. I mean, these are all pre-made. I have used libraries in the past. I don't use them as much as I would like, because I do know that the power of libraries is pretty incredible. And they are useful when, say, my wife and I are working on similar projects together. She's on her computer over here, and we're in the same libraries folder. That helps. And Mogerts, I certainly will save options for Mogerts, and we can talk about that at the end of the stream here today.
I cannot even imagine splitting a project file with my partner. That's I'm very curious if it would be wonderful or if it would be awful.
Well, it's interesting because she doesn't really focus on video. Like Photoshop and design is really her bread and butter, and then video is mine. So it's less of us editing the same projects as much as it is like I'm editing the video portion, she's giving me assets in there, and we're working that way. And it surprisingly works pretty well. Yeah. We don't do it a ton, but when we do, we have a pretty good little system going on. So, alrighty. So inside of Photoshop, again, for those that are watching that are Photoshop wizards, I am not. My wife is, but I'm not. So basically what I did, this is super simple. You can do this inside of Premiere, but not as accurately unless somebody in the stream knows how to actually create the same sort of guides. But the very first thing you are going to want to do in Photoshop is just create a new canvas and make sure that your canvas is 1080 by 1920, which is the 9:16 aspect ratio of an Instagram reel. So it's become really the standard for any vertical format video. We're just going to save this as 9:16 grid template. All right, and this is very basic stuff. Okay, and all I'm going to do is go up to View. I'm going to go to Guides, New Guide Layout. And this is, I've used this for creating just like photo carousels or things on our page. And I thought, well, this is the exact same principle for video. We just want to decide how many rows and columns we want. And so you can come in here, you can play around with the color if you want to see your guides. And again, this is not a Photoshop stream, so I'm just doing this really quickly. We don't want any columns, although you could if you wanted. We just want some rows. So the first thing we're going to do is click rows. We're going to go into number. We're going to just change this to 5. And I've already removed the gutter. I don't want any gutter. If I put like 10, that gives you a little bit of that padding in between. We don't want that. We just want to have a straight 5 lines there. And then all I'm going to do is go down to the line tool, make sure I have a stroke that's set to something that I can see, hold shift here, and I'm just going to create these lines really roughly on top of the guides so I know exactly where things are. And then once you save this, it's yours forever. You can do your thing. Okay, so those are white, I believe. If I go back up here and clear the guides, wherever those are, we gonna clear them. Cool. All right, so there we go. There's our white transparent grid, and you can do the exact same thing for 3, 4, however many you want. And then you're just going to basically bring that into Premiere to use that as your reference point. Okay. So we're back into Premiere. I'm going to go into my edit window, and I move around in these workspaces constantly. So if I'm moving around too much, and someone in the chat has a problem with it, then let me know. But it just helps me to kind of work in different spaces, especially in 9:16. Typically, if I have a 16:9, video here, it's easier to work in this edit panel. But if I'm working for Reels, you can go up here to the vertical window and you can change over here, and you'll actually see more. There's just more real estate for you to actually work with. Okay,
It's free real estate.
Free real estate. How about that? All right, so Command N, shortcut for creating a new sequence. We're starting from scratch. We're gonna build this thing. Okay, frame size 1080 by 1920. Again, if you don't want to have to do this manually every time, all you have to do is come down here, save this as a preset. So if I save this as 9:16 Instagram reel sequence, okay, and we just save it. It'll actually save down here into the like custom area, so you can see that I've actually done that in the past. And we're just going to name our sequence name. What do we want to name this? Adobe Live, because that's what we are on. And we're just going to call this 5-grid vignette. Okay. Oh, actually, this is what the name of our preset's going to be. So we're going to name this 9:16.
Welcome into Umacorn. Thanks for being here. If anyone else is just joining right now, we are with James, and we are looking at Premiere. We're going to be looking at making some ways into creating vintage style footage a little bit later, but right now we're working on a vertical layout for maybe Instagram Reels or TikTok that you can create and manufacture within Premiere.
What's up, Umacorn? Fuduval, good to see you in the chat and hear from everyone in the chat. Very excited to be on the guest side today.
Amanda's also excited because she's a social media video editor, and she said she's moving the vertical video to the side for more real estate is genius. So excited to discover this trick. So you're changing lives today.
Oh, wow. Changing lives. I don't know about that, but I'm glad to hear that maybe I am.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to just address is what we're doing with all this video, which is, obvious, but something to mention, is shooting 16:9 4K video in the way that I personally prefer it to be shot. I think if you're shooting certain things, like these clips right here, they're cinematic on their own, I think. And I'm going to just play this just so everyone can kind of watch back what we're going to be creating here.
Speaking of shooting your content, Rob asked a question a little bit earlier and asking if you use a gimbal or if you don't use a gimbal, and what is the most crucial piece of equipment besides the camera that you bring to a shoot?
That's a great question. I have a gimbal. I do not tend to use it that often, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Gimbals, sorry, my watch got caught in my headphones. Gimbals are very useful for a very specific project, and obviously getting that super stable, like handheld tracking shot, if it's a necessary requirement for a project you're doing, totally makes sense. Like there's times when I didn't use a gimbal and warp stabilizer wasn't working, and I just am kicking myself for not using it. My own style is I like to shoot a little bit more run and gun. I usually have either a monopod or just handheld with maybe like a little rig, shoulder mount, a little cage, something like that. And the reason being is these cameras, they have gotten so good. Like the internal camera stabilization is so incredibly powerful that between that and most lens stabilization, you can shoot most anything unless you're running at somebody, unless it's a big tracking shot, and shoot it, let's say at 60 frames and slow it down if you need, and throw a little bit of like a warp stabilizer on it, and it'll really, really smooth that footage out to the point where you don't even know if it was shot on a gimbal. That being said, there's plenty of jobs that I've had to use it on, so I totally understand the demand for it. And the second question is the thing that I have on every shoot. Was it that is not a lens or not a
That's
camera?
not a camera. Yeah.
Probably the lens, honestly. I would say the lens more so even than the camera is, if I can carry like 2 lenses with me at all times, I usually try to carry a wide and some prime fixed lens. I've been really into shooting a lot of 50 mil like fixed prime lenses, so that there's that juxtaposition between establishing shot and those complementary B shots.
No, that was a great answer. Thank you very much. Are you somebody that has lenses for your phone?
I do. I've tried to use them. I don't know. I actually, going back to the gimbal thing, I use the phone gimbal more than I use a gimbal for my cameras, like my professional cameras. So we have that little DJI Osmo like phone gimbal, which is really cool. So it acts as a tripod for your phone. It acts as that really nice tracking shot. And most of the time, the phone is the camera that I have in my pocket every day. And there's moments where I just don't have all this gear with me. So I can at least use that to stabilize phone footage and then kind of bring this in and do the same thing.
And then Mike in the chat saying steady to begin with is better than warp stabilized. And that is spoken like a true person who works a lot in post.
Oh, at 100%. Yeah, it's always more favorable to have that footage stabilized. And then if you add warp state, like it's just going to be perfect. It's going to be mint. So,
icing on the cake.
Yeah. All right. So that's our video here. Again, I shot all this footage in 16:9 in 4K. So we're going to basically be downsizing all this footage, and then we're going to be cropping it and fitting it to this grid. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is I want to come into my graphics here. I've already had my little template here, and I'm just going to drag this into my sequence. It doesn't ask us any questions because this is the sequence setting. And let's just make this 10 seconds. Okay, go into our time code. Boop de boop. There we go, 10 seconds. Okay, and I'm going to drag this all the way up. I really just am using this as reference, and I know I'm going to be building my clips underneath. And this is, again, just a preference. As we're dragging the clips in, I like to start from the clip that's going to be on the bottom and actually like visually work sequentially up the timeline, because then I can crop things a little bit easier once they get into the sequence here. Okay.
Now, also, are you compressing any of these pieces of footage before you're placing them into Premiere? Like, are you creating any proxies, or are they all just full 4K footage that you scale down?
Yeah, this is I'm working off of a MacBook Pro M2. So I recently picked this laptop up at the beginning of this year, and I'm able to do this without compressing or creating proxies because the laptop is super fast and has this like insane graphics card. So if you have a computer that is a little bit slower, this footage specifically that I'm using, you may have to create proxies for. But in this case, no compression, no footage has been harmed in the making of this video. And
Not yet.
Not yet, at least. It will
until
be.
it's intentionally destructed.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, this is all the full recorded footage. Cool.
You're entering the preview panel, right?
I am, yeah. So I'm double clicking in my project window, and for this, just while I'm selecting these clips, I'm going to go back into my edit window because I'm working now in some 16:9 footage. And again, if you're new to Premiere, or you don't really know that this is an option, there's a list view down here and there's an icon view. So if I go here, it's a little easier to see it. List view, icon view. I like going into icon view when I'm picking my selects. Excuse me. So you go into here, and then this way you can actually scrub through and see the clips a lot quicker than having to like double click into each clip. Just another, this is all for efficiency's sake. It's all for preference, and it's all a way that we can, speed up our workflow here. All right, so we're gonna double click into here. Again, these are just, I went out sort of on a nice sunset evening with the intention. This primarily wasn't my intention, Ryan. We were going back to what I talked about earlier. My intention was to make sort of like a pseudo documentary about like my own backyard, and without giving away too much information, but starting to
doxed.
Yeah, right. To start to interview like some local artisans making things and some local restaurants, and really like tell the whole story about this place that I call home. And this is as far as I got, as you could see. So I don't have the guts for the full project yet, but I do have footage that I really liked. So this is a good way to repurpose that.
Now, I have a question about some of your drone shots. In Jersey, do you have to get a pilot's license or an operator pilot's license?
You should. Yeah, you definitely should. I mean, there's some loose restrictions, but yeah, Jersey's a pretty strict state in that way. So I try to either use my brother-in-law who has his license, or be extremely careful.
Yeah, I just know that some places are geo-locked, so you can't even like have it take off because it knows where you are, and you have to like register it.
No, yeah, we're pretty safe here. All right, so basically all I'm doing is I'm scrubbing through the timeline or the clip here, and I'm finding the spot that I really like. I love the kind of like slow pan because I shot this at 60 frames. I know that I could actually slow this down to make a really nice cinematic looking clip. And I'm gonna basically just go all the way to pass this tree. Maybe we'll keep the sun flare in there. And I'm just going I and O on the keyboard, and then I'm just dragging it down here into my timeline. Okay, so obviously the first thing we see, wow, James, how come we see all these lines and you told us we were going to make something really cool? We will. Give it time. All right, so we're going to go in here. I'm going to now scale this clip down. Okay, it's at 100%, and this is because it's shot at 4K. So you can see how much information we have in that clip by shooting it the way we did. But I'm going to scale this down and kind of fit this. Let's go to about 30 so we can fit the sides. I'm clicking motion here. We can actually go a little bit lower. My goal is to try to keep as much of this clip as I possibly can. And then I'm going to drag this down holding shift. We're going to drag this down, keeping that sort of sun flare. We're going to go back into our vertical window here so we can see more of this. Okay, and let's zoom out here so we can see. And here is our clip right here. Okay, and I wanted to make something that was about, let's say, 8 seconds. And this clip, unfortunately, the end of it is a little bit shaky. So if I dragged this out, I don't think it would actually even reach 8 seconds. So the benefit of shooting in 60 frames per second is that we can slow that clip down to slow motion. Okay, so there's a couple ways you can do that. The quick way, Command R or whatever your keyboard shortcut is for clip speed and duration, is to go into the speed, and you're going to basically reduce the speed to 40%. Okay, 40%. And if you shoot at the right shutter speed in 60 frames per second, 40% is what you want to reduce the speed down to. So if I play this back now, we have a really nice slow motion cinematic look, and it drags that clip out enough where I actually have enough of it to play with. Let's see, all the way. Perfect. Cool. So that's our first clip placed. I like where that's at. And again, this is total preference. There's no right or wrong way to do this today. We're just having fun.
Just have your J.J. Abrams lens flares going on.
Oh, we got a couple of those to add in too. We can show those later. Yeah, they're like overused everywhere. Okay, footage. Back to my area here, and let's see what I want to do on the second clip. I like this clip of me walking across the bridge. I had a tripod, so I was able to just film myself, and I had a microphone on, so you're gonna hear some of like my lav mic. We're just gonna take the audio or the video on this. Okay, so this is really cool bridge in our town, very historic area. Okay, I'm gonna drag this in. So again, like this is a really good exercise that I'm even like, I'll remind myself to go do these things just for fun, because it's a good exercise. And Ryan, I'm sure you do this in your work as well, to go shoot something that has nothing to do with your work. And it just sort of just opens your mind up a little bit. Like I like to go places with one lens and nothing else, no phone, or maybe it's just a phone, and just see what I see and try to, it's almost like an exercise in leading lines. It's an exercise in composition, an exercise in framing, that I think is a tool and a muscle that you have to continue to use, as much as you possibly can.
Absolutely. Now I noticed when you dragged on your footage, you still have the audio selection highlighted on the bottom. So hypothetically, it should also drag on. How did you only drag on the footage?
Oh yeah, good question. Let me zoom out of this real quick. So right here, you see that there's a drag video only or a drag audio only. If you drag this whole clip, then your audio will come down into your timeline with it. But in this case, I just wanted the video. So we're just dragging that video clip, and you can place it wherever you need it to go. All right. And then we're going to scale this down. Little tips. All right, so let's drag this down here. And it's a little bit messy to start until you kind of position everything. And we're going to be doing some cropping of the video, the actual like tops and bottoms. So what I like to try to do with this is find the positioning that you want all the clips to sit at, where it makes the most sense or it looks the most visually appealing. And then we'll do the cropping after it as sort of the next step. Okay, so I want to see that whole bridge. Oh, sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. It's reminding me of his Dark Materials or something in the multiverse with like Doctor Strange with all the different layers of footage.
Yeah, it is pretty cool that way.
Cool vibe.
Thanks, man. All right, so I know I have these really cool like drone clips of this bridge. And the first clip I really wanted a car to go by, and it did not. So it's a cool clip on its own, but this other clip here, I think looks a little sweeter because there's some more action to it. It's really more of just a static shot, the car going by. My mind already goes to, oh, this would be cool as a center of the frame to sort of like split those things up and be a more symmetrical. And then maybe I can add some titles on the left and right side of that frame. So that's what we're going to do here. Again, I've already kind of selected my in and out points, but let's go I on the keyboard and let's go out. We see that little jitter here, but we can certainly fix that with a little warp stabilizer. That's the time when something like that is very subtle and it would work really well.
And once you have identified your in and outs, when you drag that footage, it's only going to drag the area that you have identified, but not damage the actual clip.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Marsha's excited. She says, this is so good, even for a newbie.
Sweet. Good. All right. Good. That's what we're here for. I mean, honestly, there's no bad time to start editing inside of Premiere. If you're just starting out, great. If you're experienced and you learned something new today, I love coming on here and learning from other creators. So it's a cool community that we have here, and I'm glad to be a part of it. All right, so there's a couple other clips I didn't put in. Where is the one that I wanted? It is, oh, here we go. So again, like I was by myself this day and I wanted to be able to just film. I knew everything I wanted was pretty static or very, very lightly handheld, because maybe one day I was going to need to teach it on Adobe Live. So that's what we're doing today. So I set an in point. Okay, and ignore the loudness. That's because I'm inside my van with my microphone attached to my shirt. And naturally, as one does.
At least Taylor Swift isn't like playing on the speakers. Like,
I know.
We hear you singing along.
Oh, dude, that would have been so much better, honestly. Yeah, that's another little tip too when shooting this kind of work. If it's like travel film, docu-style film, anything like that, the audio is such a big part of it. And usually I tend to keep a shotgun mic or some sort of microphone on the camera, because going back to that comment that someone had in the chat about fixing it in post, while there is tons of sound effects and sound design that you can source from all these places, there's nothing that can really replace the sounds that you get when you're actually out in the field, known as that diegetic sound. So if you can record it, if it's the sound of a river, it's the sound of the birds on a really nice microphone, then absolutely record it and use that in your films rather than immediately thinking, oh, I have to delete all the audio and put all new audio in.
And you tether your audio equipment to whatever you're using to record video, right? So you're not having to do like a slate where you have to clap to line up the audio.
Correct. Yeah. So if I'm shooting on my cinema camera, the camera has these mini XLR ports, which is really handy. So I have an XLR to mini XLR port, so I can run a Tascam recorder into it. I can run my microphone into it, which is what I'm using here. So I tend to use this to record really nice audio. On my DSLR or my mirrorless camera, I might set up a shotgun mic on the top, or maybe it sort of depends on the project. But yeah, for most of this kind of stuff, I just try to keep a microphone attached whenever I can, because then you get like fun little moments that you might have not picked up that could be used in the video in some way.
Also in the chat, Mike is saying that he might use Adobe Podcast to remove that noise. And I will let you guys know that that small feature has already saved my job several times. In the last 2 months, I have thrown so much of my life onto that.
It is actually incredible. I was on here a couple weeks, maybe like a couple months ago, and Alex Hogue, another creator, was teaching that specific thing of how to remove that noise, and it just blew my mind. I'm like, that's crazy. Like even the denoiser doesn't do that good of a job inside of Premiere. So the Adobe Podcaster, absolutely check it out. If we have some time, maybe we can throw one in there.
Also, welcome Bruce Gonzalez to the chat. Good to see you again, as always. He's asking, when creating and choosing clips for this type of content, do you find it matters if the clips are taken at different days?
That's a great question. I think it doesn't. I would probably say it's totally up to you how you cut them. I think if you're shooting in the same color profile, it doesn't necessarily matter when you shot it. So let's say you're shooting on a Sony and you shoot everything in S-Log2 or S-Log. It doesn't matter if you shoot one week and other clips the next week. Even if you shoot some at night and some during the day, it may actually look kind of cool to have that juxtaposition inside of your sequence. But I think the most important thing is just to make sure that everything is somewhat properly exposed and has some consistency to it. You'll notice if you watch it and you're like, oh, that clip looks way off. Like I definitely didn't shoot that. Or if it's the only sunset clip and everything else is raining, that might look a little awkward.
That might give it away.
It might give it away, or it could look cool. I don't know.
But also the color tab in Premiere is a mighty tab. If anything, I'd also just suggest using the tabs. I slept on them for too long, and then once I started to embrace the tabs of Premiere, it makes
we're gonna
so much easier.
We're gonna actually be, once we finish the grid itself, we're gonna hop into that specific tab and go over how I color grade these clips. Because right now these clips are all shot in C-Log 3. That's just the color profile that I use when I'm recording. I have a couple LUTs that I like to use to sort of quick edit and then sort of grade these things. Okay, so what we can see right now is we have all the clips laid out, all the ones that I want. Okay, and if I play it back, it kind of is starting to look good, but things are a little bit out of place. So we see that James here walking through is way too far down on the grid. So we're going to go and move this up. And this is when we start to crop some things. Okay, so the bottom clip, so if I just hide all these layers, we see that the bottom clip, we don't have to crop it, but I'm just going to crop it for the sake of doing it. I like that this, we're going to go back into our vertical tab again so we can see this a little bit better. Let's drag this over. Okay, and this is a very easy little effect. You go up to your effects window here, just type in crop, very handy, and you're just going to drag crop onto your clip, this one right here, and then you'll notice all these left, top, right, bottom effects. All I'm going to do is take the top, and I'm just going to crop this clip as if I was just snipping it away to fit this guide. Okay, so now I don't have to worry about that excess spilling over. I'm going to turn that back on. Okay, and then we have our second clip. So we have James walking down the path. We're going to take the motion and just adjust this before I crop it, make sure I'm kind of in the center of the frame. I think I like something like that. Since I know I walk into the frame, you'll eventually see my legs, and I'm going to go and crop that as well.
It's interesting to see you use the effect for cropping onto your content, because the After Effects portion of me is always so quick to hop into the masking, and then I always have to bring down the feathering, and it's actually kind of more complicated than the crop tool. So
no, it's
nice
and well, there's definitely times where like masking is a better option. Most of the time it probably is, and in this case, like the crop tool is minorly destructive, but all you have to do is just flip that effect on and off. And for this case, I think it's the best use of the tool because we're cleaning them up. Ryan, how long have you been an After Effects guru?
Let's see. I guess a little bit over 10 years now. I kind of fell into it through my old agency job. So I was interning and I was just playing around with the downtime that I had as an intern, and then all of a sudden they were like, "Oh, Ryan can do that," and then it just like was self-fulfilling.
That's awesome. Hey, that's the best way to learn, right?
Absolutely. I mean, in my experience, watching live streams and YouTube videos are the way to learn anything, more so than a class has ever taught me.
Yeah, I have to agree with that too. I think just being exposed to how other people do things too is it's a refreshing way to see things, because everyone has a different style of how they do something, and that doesn't make it right, but it also just it's always nice to learn from other people too.
Yeah, there are 10 ways to do the same thing in all Adobe programs.
Oh, I know, really. Okay, so you can see how quickly we're doing this. It's not very time consuming at all. And it's fun. I think it's kind of cool because you're creating like a little collage, like a moving vignette or a moving collage. Okay, so if I play this back, we're going to hide our grid so we know that everything is looking nice.
I'm also enjoying the lineup of both you and the van following the same direction.
Yeah, and if you sort of look at the way, part of this was intentional, but now I'm looking at it, it's like, wow, that actually worked pretty well. Like there's this single line that's almost going through the entire frame. You know, we have the trees and the light at the bottom. We have me walking through the center of the frame, which is sort of leading your eye to the drone clip in front of us there, and then the van falling away, and then that nice little branch in front of the river. So like everything has this really nice symmetry to it. And I think the cool thing about that drone clip being shot down is that dark contrast splitting the two, top and bottom. And some of it, again, is intentional. Other times, we call it a happy accident. You just are like, wow, that works pretty well. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's also important to pay attention to just the movement of your clips, as they also are going to add extra texture to it. It's cool to see that your top river is also kind of mirroring the panning of your bottom river as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see, I slowed that clip down. One other thing, you know, we could do, I like the fact that the river is moving a little bit fast, but I think maybe just to contrast that bottom clip, we're going to slow that down as well. So we're going to go back into our speed and duration, or Command R. I'm going to take this to 40%. And this clip doesn't move much, so there's not much I wanted other than having that slow moving water, just to kind of give it a little bit more of a cinematic feel. So our reel, it almost seems like the 23 or the 30 frames per second speed is me in the van. And then the drone, because it's shot down and looks so slow, already looks like it's slow motion. And then we have the top and bottom clips that sort of feel slow motion as well. So kind of a cool little juxtaposition.
Oh, Roland's over on YouTube saying that YouTube's videos are great for picking up snippets of information. For good at foundational learning, most well-designed non-YouTube courses are much, much better. Which, yeah, I definitely don't mean to discredit any form of courses. I went to art school, so I definitely have learned a lot from classes. I'm just learning now at my age. I am getting more out of my own from not having the time to do a full several-hour course thing.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. I think everybody has a different way of learning too, which just makes it all the better. Okay, so Ryan, as you said, we're over here in the color tab. Okay, so everything looks well placed. I think I'm liking how everything is, but I want to color grade these clips to make them really pop and make them super cinematic. Okay, so if no one has ever opened the color tab, I'll just briefly run through kind of what we're looking at, but I'm going to try to do it quickly. So basically you have all your white balance, your tints, your saturation. So right now, the only thing that's actually being affected is, if you can see, is this bottom clip, because I've clicked right here. Okay, so if I adjust the contrast, you'll see those darks, the blacks, the whites, highlights. And then under here is where we can start to play with LUTs. That Premiere actually has some pretty decent LUTs, I think, that are baked into Creative Cloud. So if you were going to go through here and just decide, let's see, I actually use a couple of these in some of my work sometimes. The Gold Rush HDR is a nice look. It's kind of got a cool like blue. Let's actually open this clip up a little bit bigger so we can show what it's really
also
doing.
For the newbies that are watching, or not even newbies, that makes it sound bad, but for people who don't know what LUTs are lookup tables. So it'll be a way for your footage to reference color and kind of be the Rosetta Stone between your footage to say, this is what I want all whites to be and the blacks to be.
Ooh, the Rosetta Stone. I like that, Ryan. That's good stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for explaining that again. Like this is what should be done at the end of the color correction phase. So right now I'm just doing this kind of to save time, but we can go into the actual color correction. So before I actually do any sort of these creative LUTs, what I would probably do, let me delete this. And I did a couple of these things. Delete this. What you want to do is you'd open your Lumetri scopes here. So this is how I have my scopes laid out. I have my like vector scopes, and this is basically just telling me the brightest part of the image and the darkest part. So the whites, highlights, blacks, shadows. And then this is all of my saturation and the RGB color channels, so that I know everything feels balanced, if that is what I'm intending to do. If you want to push it, like if you click this clip, let's actually click the other clip, because I think we'll see more of that one. This is my clip now. If I crank the saturation, you'll see that because I'm shooting in log, like you need to really crank that saturation and bring some of that back. But with our contrast, let's bring down maybe the blacks a little bit. I like to crush the blacks to give it some nice, just nice contrast between the highlights and the shadows. bring that contrast up a little bit. Maybe I'll bring the shadows up a hair.
And while lumetri scopes are a great way to visualize the data so that you can understand what's happening in your footage, it's also really great if a count comes by and you want to look like you're really busy and really in the depths of things. You're like, yeah, and all these, this is just my constant work day. Thank you.
This is what I'm doing. And then you just leave it open. They're like, they've never opened that ever again. Like, what are they doing? Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, if you like look at this inside of Premiere versus something like, you know, DaVinci, like this is a lot simpler to use for somebody who's just getting started in it. I'm sure people will have some comments in the chat about that.
It's not as scary as it looks. It looks much scarier than what's actually telling you.
It's really not. Yeah, all you really need to know, like I've turned a lot of these on and off. So if you go into this little wrench settings here, this is how you can kind of set things up to work for you. So there's all these presets. So if I go to all scopes, you can see all the scopes. Again, this is not to scare you in any way, but this bottom scope is just telling you the brightness. So that highlight, shadow. So don't worry about the color so much. This top right, that's telling you more of that like magenta, yellow, blue. And then this is your RGB like saturation wheel. And then this is your histogram. So luckily,
and then real quick on the bottom left, can you just explain kind of how you would read that? Is it like that the top is the brightest, right? And the bottom is the darkest?
Yep. So I'll move it. So if I move this and you just watch that clip of me, you'll see that the top where it says 100, anytime you see this like flat line going across the top, that means that you're crushing those highlights. And by crushing the highlights, you're losing all the information in them. So you're blowing them out essentially, which you don't want to do because there's a lot of that nice information. So in here you see that there's not any clouds, but there's some blue in the sky that you like to preserve. And then the same goes for the blacks and the shadows on the bottom. So if I crush this all the way, that's actually like all the way exposed. You still see some of that, which is kind of crazy to me. But if I crush the blacks, you'll see now that line. And this is now showing me that this dark area here on the road, this bridge, if I crush the shadows even more, like we're losing a lot of that information. And this is one of the biggest benefits of shooting on a cinema camera or something that has, what's known as high dynamic range. These cameras, while the iPhones and smartphones are very good at shooting a lot of these things, the cameras that you're spending more money on have high dynamic range, meaning that their color, like I'm trying to find a way to explain it in the best, but the color spectrum is much larger. So you can crush a lot of the contrast even more and create a much richer tone. That's why when you watch cinematic films that are shot, on reds or REs or black matte or whatever it is, they always look so rich. One, because the colorist did an amazing job, but because the capability of the camera allows it to do that.
Yeah, and gives the colorist actually the tools to work with so that they could change the color of the entire scene if they want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Also over on YouTube, Roland's asking if you need a LUT if you're using Premiere Pro's color match feature. I don't know. What do you think? I guess you don't have to. I mean, a lot of times LUTs can be a big thing for styling and can be choice. Color match can help it so everything looks consistent.
Yeah. I mean, I guess a LUT just like helps in that process. I don't think it matters one way or another. I think no matter what, like you're trying to still match everything to be as consistent as possible.
And meanwhile, over on Behance, everyone's just saying how scared they are and intimidated by color grading. So
okay, well, all right.
Voodoo
so
says that you explain it very well, though. So maybe
good.
You're turning some opinions around.
Oh man, I'm in no way like. I mean, I have friends that are colorists and they are just insane. So do not be intimidated by it. Again, like don't think that. I think if you just start to think in terms of color grading being a part of the workflow every single time, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And right now, like you can see that all these clips, although they were shot in log, I shoot log color profile, but I have like a color assist on my camera so I can see what the final image might look like. So you can either load LUTs onto the camera, and this allows me to expose it pretty accurately so that if I throw a LUT on, the LUT's going to take care of most of the work for me. So if you're shooting something at home, and as long as you expose it correctly, meaning do not blow out the highlights, try to maintain those shadows, and if you're using a custom white balance, try to make sure your white balance is appropriate for the time of day you're shooting. When you bring this into Premiere, throwing really any LUT on here is going to look pretty good. Like if I look at, any of these things, like that looks pretty sweet. I don't really have to do much. You know, if I went here and I threw on another LUT, which one was that? Gold tobacco. That looks pretty cool, you know, and that it gives it a much different like vintage look, but I like that. In this case, I have a couple that LUTs that I've like downloaded over the years, specifically for a C70, like a C-Log 3 look. So I'm just going to throw those on here real quick. Actually, you know what? Let's just make it easy for everyone at home because you guys don't have that. So let's just use a LUT in here and then we'll keep on moving.
And while you're doing that, we are a little bit halfway through or so. We got about 30 minutes left.
Cool.
And if anybody is wanting to nominate someone or even themselves to be a guest on Adobe Live, you can submit your recommendations for creatives in the tab on Behance.
Yeah, please do. Really. Like it's like we've been saying, there's just so much to love about this community. And we're all here trying to just better ourselves as creatives and hopefully teach you watching, you know, how to pick up on some of these things. Okay, so this is not the color grade that I initially gave this, but these are just LUTs that are here inside of Adobe Premiere Pro. This gives it like a more vintagey kind of like desaturated look, which I think looks kind of nice. But let's say I wanted to change that. All I'm doing is going into the creative tab here. I haven't even touched any of this. So if you're intimidated by it, don't worry about it. We're gonna go here. We're gonna go to browse. And these are LUTs again that I've kind of like worked with in the past. So these are just like for the C70 and the R5 specifically. So it's just kind of specific to my camera, and it's C-Log and 2 and 3. So I'm going to use C-Log 3 on this because I know it'll look really, really nice. And that's the before and that's the after. But the intensity is, I think it's like too much. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to change the intensity to like 75. So that's the beauty of throwing a LUT on. You don't have to use the entire thing. You can kind of use what you want. And we're going to just do the exact same thing here, just showing you guys clip by clip rather than an adjustment layer. For some reason,
Marsha's asking if you can use the same or similar LUTs for Photoshop for a campaign look. And yes,
yeah,
you can.
Yes, you can. Yeah, they're all the Adobe products, you know, I feel like for the most part, everything can be sort of intertwined, which is, I think, one of the most like powerful things about Creative Cloud.
You would access that, I think, in the photo lookup filter effect or curves. I think it's photo lookup.
Is it? Where is that?
In Photoshop. I mean.
Oh, inside of Photoshop. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. So I am just going on here and throwing the LUT that I want. Okay, and then we're going to, cool. So, I mean, you can kind of see just like the richness that comes out in that is just, I think, really beautiful. And it starts to bring it all together just with the color. So it's probably a little bit dark, a little bit contrasty. So what I can do now is just go into each of these clips and I can go back to my color window. You can see how you end up switching back and forth quite a bit. So if I come in here, it looks like I'm getting pretty low to that 0 mark. So I'm just going to take my shadows. I'm going to bring this up and you'll notice that just by doing that, I've now kind of brought the blacks back up. Maybe I want to crush them a little bit more. Maybe I want to take the highlights up a little bit. And then as you see on the left-hand side in my RGB, it's definitely a warmer image, which it's telling us like there's not much magenta, there's not much blue in it. There's a little bit of red. And what I like to do is try to just balance that a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll pull the tint over a little bit. So I'm bringing more of that magenta in so it feels like a balanced image. And then I'm going to do the same thing up here. So I'm going to pull some more of the blues in just to cool it off a little bit. So here's my before and here's my after. And to me, that looks pretty nice. Let me bring the
And you're
blacks
working
up.
individually between clips rather than an adjustment layer over everything, right?
Yeah. I mean, I do both. For this, specific situation, I'm just doing clip by clip because there's not too many of them. But a very quick way to do it is if I didn't want to add a LUT to any of these clips, you'd come over here to our bin. It's like everything is so small down here. Let me just go to my assembly. And adjustment layers, again, like are such a powerful tool and such a powerful way to do it. So I go to new item, adjustment layer, make sure it's set to the same sequence. We just drag that adjustment layer on top. And in Premiere, that adjustment layer, whatever effect you add to that adjustment layer, it will affect everything underneath your adjustment layer. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna basically go back to my color window, and I'm going to take the whole adjustment layer and I'm going to add that one LUT on top of it. Okay, so I'm going to just put it up here, go to browse, and here's my LUT. And right now it's going to look probably pretty crazy because I've now added like double LUTs, which, you know, we do not want. So if I came in here and I went to my creative tab and I just turn this off, you know, you can kind of just turn these off and see that that adjustment layer is essentially doing the exact same thing, just with one layer instead of going on every single clip, right?
So I felt like a 2008 Paramore video there for a second.
I know. Oh my God, that's so perfect. Cool.
Also, if you guys are enjoying this, there's so much content that's happening on Adobe Live. Up next, we're going to have Pixie Pugh for a new episode and next one in the series. But then also, Adobe's Teresa Au has conversations with some of the people who make up the rapidly expanding creator economy, including Kuno of Design Studio and educational platform I Love Creatives, illustrator and author Misha Blaze, and many more to come. Subscribe now to follow along for the full season at adobe.ly/inthemaking, or find the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Man, dude, you have such a good podcaster voice. We should get on a podcast together. I don't know what it would be about, but we could do one.
About color LUTs.
Yeah, we just talk LUTs for like 3 hours. They're like, I'm not joining this. Okay, so I know we're kind of like 25 minutes away, and I still have a bunch of things I want to go over. So I'm going to breeze through a couple of these things. So let's say we're happy with how this is turning out. I certainly am. I think it looks pretty cool, but I want to add maybe some title like in the middle. I just think it's begging for some like really subtle, simple title. So there's a couple ways you can do that. We can do it here inside of Premiere, which we all know and love. If you go into the captions and graphics window and you use your text, we can add all our text in here, blah, 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 blah. But I'm not going to do that today. I want to hop into After Effects and create something just a little bit more elevated, something with a little bit of animation. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that, rather than exporting this whole thing, compressing it, bringing it into After Effects, then bringing it back to Premiere, I'm just going to dynamically link this to After Effects. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is right click, and the first thing I actually want to do, well, let's just keep these non-nested. So the first thing I'm going to do is right click and replace with After Effects composition. Okay, and I'm going to save
easy.
Boom, easy, done. I'm going to save this. I don't know why this is asking me for a bunch of things, but just ignore that. Okay. And now what you'll see, I think, what happened here? 1, 2, 3. Oh, this clip is just a little off. Okay. So all this did, which is pretty sweet, is it opened these clips directly inside of Adobe After Effects. And so anything that I add and do to this here will automatically be updated inside of Premiere Pro. This has been around for a while, but it's something that I don't talk about a lot, and it's such a powerful tool. If you have a machine that can kind of rip through a lot of this footage, I have to just say, like an M2 MacBook like this, to be able to edit 4K footage quickly with no buffering, and then come into After Effects and go back, big advocate of this computer. So if anyone else,
you've been enjoying it.
I've been loving it. Yeah. You
and
pay for what you get.
Right. I'm noticing also when you bring it over and it's now not nested, but it's replaced with an After Effects composition, all that work that you just did is still living over on Premiere.
Correct.
So you're dealing with kind of your log videos back over in After Effects.
Correct. Yeah.
Unaffected.
Yep. So you can come back here, you can color grade this when everything's all said and done, and add all your adjustments back here in After Effects. In Premiere. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm just creating a text layer. All right, let's just delete that. Let's go right click, new text layer. And I'm just going to say like an evening stroll. Okay, I like that idea. It's a little big right now, but we'll fix that. I'm going to duplicate it, Command D, and then let's maybe think of another title over here. I already thought of this title, so you guys are like, wow, what a clever title. He must have already thought about it.
ChatGPT.
Let's see. Cool.
Also, it's interesting. You could easily make this very ominous or very happy, depending on a music choice that you put on top of it.
I know. I really could, right? It's like it can be anything that you want it to be.
Reverb Mike wants to know why you are preferential to Premiere over After Effects for a project like this.
I don't know. I just use Premiere more often. I tend to prefer just my personal workflow inside of Premiere. I love After Effects too. I think they could both work the same exact way. Again, like if you were more of an After Effects user, this is not a super complicated thing to do inside of After Effects or Premiere. So just total preference.
Kind
All
of like
right.
when we were talking earlier, saying you can do the same thing in 10 different ways. You can also do the
Exactly.
same thing in 10 different programs.
Yeah, really. Okay. So a couple of things. So this font, if you're looking for any sort of like custom fonts that you want that you're not really seeing inside of After Effects or inside of Premiere, all you're going to do is go over here to where it says text. And then up here it says add Adobe fonts. And this is where I actually found this font this morning. So if you click add Adobe fonts, your Adobe font library will pop up, like the type kit of where all these fonts come from. And I just wanted to hit this real quick. I wanted something that was really clean, something simple. And I like to have different line weights, at least in my personal sort of work, is to have something that could be a little bit thicker, something a little thinner, so that not everything has the same consistent look, but it's the same font. So I looked through clean, some fonts that I really liked, kind of kept going. Again, just preference. I think I ended up on like page 3 or 4 or something like that. And I found
I
a
love
font that,
Solil.
yeah, it's really nice. Where was I here? I feel like maybe it was on 2.
What's also cool is you can also switch out some of these previews with just actual sample text too. So if you wanted to see how the thing that you were writing actually looks the way that it would be presented in these different, you can also switch it out.
Yeah, so if you just wrote that here, right? Is that like where it would, like, let's just type the river valley. Maybe we want it all caps, right? So if this is what I'm thinking about, now I can see all the different line weights. Yeah, good point, Ryan. To know, okay, cool. Like I can start to see these two things come together. And if you like it, all you got to do is add it to the family here, which I've already added. So it's added to your Adobe apps. If you're using any Adobe products at the time, you're going to have to just close out of the window and then reopen it so that it actually populates into your text bar. But here it is. We have our Azo Sans, which is nice. We have our regular, we have medium, bold, different line weights that I think can look really nice for something subtle like this.
And then Amanda's saying that she loves Adobe fonts. It's her favorite. Sometimes she first image searching for a font that she likes and uses a screenshot to find something exact or similar on Adobe fonts.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also a great feature.
Yeah, it's gotta love it, man.
Amanda, do you have any font recommendations for me? I add too many to my computer, but I like to think that I can always add more.
Yeah, we always need some fonts. I remember using, I feel like before I got into really like using these products pretty heavily, I was using like DaFont or some of the, and every once in a while, like I'll still go to that, but yeah, the Adobe fonts are pretty wonderful.
Brings me back to my MySpace days.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's say I am liking the way this is looking, but I want it to be a little bit more subtle. Okay, so I'm gonna go in here, press T on my keyboard. I'm gonna take the opacity down to like, let's say 75, River Valley as well. I don't know, this is just like a preference for me of, I don't want the text to be so overpowering, especially with this clip. I want it to be even maybe more subtle. So we'll go in here to, let's say 60%. All right, and 60%. Okay, and I want to add a little effect here. Let's go lower on this to like 55. All right, so I want to add just a little effect. I want this to kind of like fade on, but in like a sequential order. So whereas normally like an opacity fade is just a quick opacity like dissolve. So in order to do that, we're going to add some range selection animations inside of After Effects. And Ryan, this is where you can laugh at me if I do this totally wrong, or if this is how you would do it.
I have nothing to laugh about. It's going to be great.
Okay, good. So under the text properties, in every text property inside of After Effects, you have this animate button. You'll have a very similar button if you're using shape layers. It just allows you to create way more like offset properties and animations and things like that. So the first thing I want to add is just an opacity range selector. And you'll notice that we've now had this animator named below. I'm going to press return on my keyboard and just name this opacity range, just so that I remember that. Because if you add more of these, it starts to get a little confusing. Okay, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the start and end property, and I'm going to zoom in so you can kind of see what's happening here. So if I press the stopwatch here on the keyboard and I go Command Shift and arrow, I'm just moving, you know, like 1 second or a couple, like 10 frames, which is, I feel like, a nice like slow time for this to fade on. We're going to add our stopwatch here, or our keyframe, and I'm going to drag this to 100. And you'll notice that when I dragged it to 100, there's this little like bar that kind of moves across the text. And that's basically saying, okay, we're going to start this animation here and we're going to end this animation at the end of the text. And we're going to actually now add what that animation is. If I play this back, nothing's happening because we haven't told After Effects to do anything yet. And that's where the opacity property comes in. So what I want that opacity to sort of like fade in gradually and have every letter come in a little bit later than the letter before. Okay, so we're going to go stopwatch here. K on my keyboard is a shortcut to get to my next keyframe. We're going to set that, and then I'm going to go back here with the little arrow, and I'm going to go to 0. Okay, so I go 0 to 100. Cool. And we have something that's like building, sort of like, what is the word? Text, letter by letter. Thank you. My brain completely just shut off for a second. But I want it to look a little bit smoother than that. It looks a little bit too rigid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle this advanced tab down. We're going to see all these properties. Do not be intimidated by them. They just help make your stuff look cooler and a little bit more professional. The shape is the first thing I'm going to change. I'm going to go ramp up. So this is sort of that like ease in that I want to have happen. And I'm just going to change these properties from like 0 to 50%, and maybe the ease low is 30%. Okay. And now when we start, you'll notice that it animates in very smoothly, but I don't see it going from like 0 to 100. And the reason being is you've now created more of like a Bezier. So to change that, you have to go to your offset here, click your stopwatch and change the offset to -100. And that'll basically start it well before any of that animation happens. Go to K on your keyboard and go to 100. Okay, and now we have that entire animation happening.
So it's just the beauty of it is that you can really go on an experiment. And like what I like to do a lot of times, even if I'm not familiar with an effect or something, just going in and dragging it and just bringing it up to 100, bringing it down to 0 and see what it does. And then the beauty of keyframes is you can just tween between anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. So very, very subtle, very simple way to do that. And that's sort of just one example of a very simple way to create an animation inside of After Effects that almost doesn't look like it was created inside of After Effects, which I really like. I think that looks clean. We can do the same thing here to the River Valley, but I am getting short on time, and there's another example that I want to show you guys. So I'm going to hop back into Premiere for the last 10, 12 minutes here. Okay.
Also, Roland, to answer your question about Mogerts, we talked a little bit about Mogerts earlier today too, and we're just kind of exploring ways to do it outside of those pre-made areas.
Oh yeah,
but you can also always turn anything into a Mogert that you can then apply to your whole project. But
you can.
That's for another day.
And Roland, if you want to go back and watch some of the other Adobe Lives, I did teach a whole Adobe Live on Mogerts last year or the year before, and that should be on the Adobe Live YouTube. So there's a lot of good information in there of how to save it, how to create it, all that good stuff.
Not you sliding in here with the years ahead of my time.
It's just time goes by too fast. That's all it is. All right. So the last thing I wanted to show you, because that is actually what the thumbnail is about, is how to create this like vintage Super 8 Succession look, which is a lot easier. Yeah, someone needs to play that music in the background. Cool. All right, so these are just a couple clips from a recent trip to Iceland back in the summer. And
so jealous.
Oh, dude, have you been?
No.
Oh my goodness.
I felt like I did by flipping through your Instagram story highlight, though. I was just like, I want to go.
You have to. It is such a magical. I'll go with you. We'll go. We'll do a podcast on color grading and
we'll make it a business expense.
There we go. So I'm gonna just start a new sequence real quick. I know we're going to be working kind of against the clock here, but hopefully this doesn't take too long. Okay, speed run. How we doing? We're going to call this Iceland Vintage Succession. Boom. All right, so 16:9 rather than 9:16. This is just sort of for fun and to show you guys how to have this apply to all your other cool projects. Okay, so we're going to go into Iceland. I have a couple clips I've already laid out. I don't know why I like this clip, but it looks cool. There's some movement to it.
What is it?
It's just my shirt there's like a little railing here and then our view of this insane beach. And I planned, again, like this was another project that I planned on doing more with. I had done another video from Iceland a couple years ago, and this one I wanted it to be more of like a travel docu-series, and I didn't feel like shooting a lot. I shot more photos, so I'm using what I have, and that's totally okay. All right, so we're gonna just drag this in, keep the existing settings. I shot in 4K, so we're gonna have to right click, set to frame size, go into effects controls, just go to 50% and hide that, okay? And I just think this like looks like it could be in a little docu movie or short film. So we're gonna add that. This is my father-in-law in a field of lupins, and I had him
Yeah,
pose
that's
for me.
gorgeous. I saw you shot some on film in this area for photo, right?
Yeah. Shot a lot of film. We went there primarily because he and I are both very big into birding. And
Birder.
there was this summer, there's a big like migration with puffins and shorebirds and things like that. And it was just a beautiful time of the year. Plus, it was the midnight sun, so it never got dark out.
That's weird.
Which was
That's so weird.
crazy.
That's so cool.
Very cool. This is a shot here of me just kind of walking down the street with literally nobody around. Wish that our car wasn't there, but such is life.
Well, on another Adobe Live, we'll show how to get rid of that.
Oh yeah, we'll
throw
be
that
here
in
for
After Effects.
We'll be here for 5 hours. Although you could probably do it very quickly.
Yep.
Okay, so I kind of like the light cut here. Again, this is not really meant for the like compositions as much as I want to show you guys these overlays. So I'm just gonna add a couple clips. Let's go that one. Let's maybe cut there, and then I can cut to me because it's sort of a light clip. It might match nicely. So
Voodoo wants to know, by the way, how you stay motivated to finish a product if you come out to the point where you think, oh my God, I should have shot more footage for this. How do you push forward after
that? The simple answer is sometimes I don't. But I keep trying to dig into archives and think, how can I repurpose things that I never finished? How can I actually finish it? What can I recreate with it? And I think formats like this, formats like Instagram, and just Behance even are a great way to showcase like your skills without having to tell an entire story. I mean, my personal preference is to finish something and for it to be a full story, but in some cases you just don't have the bandwidth or the time to do that.
You're out here pretending Jersey is Iceland in a few shots.
Right? I went from Jersey to Iceland. What am I doing? All right. So the first thing I want to do, I have this folder here of assets. So these are assets, again, that most of them are free, honestly. Like they've been downloaded and collected from various places over the course of, my editing career. Some are light leaks, some are little scratches. This is a cool little like scratch, which is perfect for something like a Super 8 projector. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's just take this whole clip here and I'm going to drag it down onto what we have below. And obviously we don't see anything because we have to use a blend mode to get rid of the black and keep the white because we want to actually see that texture, but we don't see that right now. So we're going to go into our effects controls, blend mode, and we're going to go to screen. And screen's going to now allow us to see that really cool like scratch effect. And even just that on a somewhat okay clip looks pretty sweet. I think it gives us some cool texture. Okay, but we're not really done there. I want to add maybe some like lens burns because what we're trying to do is we're trying to like replicate what that old Super 8 or 16 millimeter film would look like. And a lot of the times there were these film burns that came into the lens. So we want to try to match that. Okay, and again, I've downloaded these. I believe Adobe Stock has a lot of like overlays like this and things that you can source. And I don't know if any of them in here are from Adobe Stock, but they are available. And you should absolutely check them out. If not, I've used places like Motion Array, Artlist, free stuff on the internet. So just there's a breadth of places to use these.
Also, film is definitely becoming way more into the zeitgeist of like real cinematography, like major motion films. I recently watched They Clone Tyrone on Netflix, and that is like grainy as much as you can grain. So if you need inspiration, check that out.
I would love to. All right, so let's see. So I set the blend mode here to overlay instead of screen because it's more white. And there's just a lot going on here and it's way, way too much in my opinion. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just come in here. I'm gonna take this opacity down to like 20%. Okay, we just wanna see a little bit. We wanna have that like subtle little blast of color. And if it's too bright, then we can always take it down. I think the blend mode, we want darken or we want multiply. Maybe that's what we want here. And we only have a couple minutes left here.
Also, Robert wants to know if you saw at the Orange Lighthouse than you at Island was only 18 feet high.
The small, there's like a bunch of orange lighthouses. There's like a really small one on the cliffs in the north. That one might be the one he's talking about, but yeah, I'm not totally sure which one he means.
Oh, and then it looks like you had a ratio change there.
Yeah, so here we go. So this is the Super 8 template. So again, this is like what you'd honestly be seeing. So in that like 4:3 aspect ratio, or even like 3:2, or whatever the ratio was when film was more prevalent, is how we're going to try to make this feel and look the way that it did back then, and maybe fool our audience a little bit, even though they know it's just a trend. But it looks cool.
Our audience is smarter than that.
They're much smarter. All right, so we can't pull the rug over their eyes. Is that the saying? All right, so we're just gonna drop this in. Okay, great, cool. Now we're done. Except we don't see anything, so we got to go back to our blending modes. All right, so back into our blend mode, and I'm gonna go to darken. Okay, so because we want to get rid of that white, we're going to darken. If we wanted to get rid of the black, we're going to screen. So, and honestly, like blending modes, sometimes I forget. Just play around with whatever one cuts that thing out that you need it to be cut out in. And just like that, you went from having none of that texture to now having 3 really cool overlays that are placed on this that kind of give it a really cool vintage look. All right, if we wanted to elevate it even more, it looks really cool, but the sound should be like Succession. That sound, we should hear that projector. We should hear some of that like sound of a camera whirring or being loaded or something like that. Okay, so I've already sourced these inside of my sound effects window. I have a couple options here that, again, I sourced from Artlist. Epidemic Sound's another one. And I believe if you actually go into the audio tab here inside of Premiere Pro and you click Browse, I don't know if there's sound effects yet, but let's try. It might just be music, but let's see. Film projector, maybe.
Oh, Mike also suggests that you can play with the frame rate as well to
yes. Yeah, that's actually a great point. Because I think what's Super 8's like 18 frames per second or something like that. So I think you can come in here and modify. Where's
also something that we've kind of touched on today a little bit with color while we were talking about it, and even like ratios, is just the art of subconscious storytelling. So whether it's you're switching up the ratio or you're adjusting the frame rate, speaking of YouTube Academy and also Adobe Live, there are countless videos that talk about that. So if it's something you're interested in, check it out. It's a way to bring your videos to the next level.
Absolutely, dude. Yeah, that would be amazing. And yeah, thank you. I mean, for everyone that's been in the chat today and kind of been along on the ride and given tips too. Like there's so many of these things that I wouldn't even think of. And it's a good reminder as we're here. We're here trying to get better, Ryan. We're here trying to learn, trying to teach.
And now that we're in the last like 3 or 4 minutes, do you want to just quickly for anyone that joined a little bit late, just cycle through everything that we worked on today?
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. So for those that joined late, we really spent a fair amount of time learning how to create this really cool little like Instagram vignette here. So finding ways to repurpose footage that maybe was used for a bigger project that you were sitting on, repurposing iPhone footage and sharing it in some way, whether it's on social media, YouTube, or even just your phone to look back at and know, cool, I did something with this, I finished it, I'm proud of it. I think that's, for me, that's the big takeaway, is just start to do the work. If you feel like maybe the project failed or you didn't get enough footage, you can always use what I call the scraps. And a lot of the time they are nicer than you think when you start to put them together. And then we quickly went over how to create this cool little sequence here to make it look like it's a Super 8mm film, using some overlays that can be sourced from Adobe stock, using some subtle sound design and some clips from a recent trip here to Iceland. So, and then, yeah, we did a little bit of After Effects animating using the opacity range selector and dynamically linked the two from Premiere and After Effects. And like always, this stream goes by way too fast, and I never get everything done I want to get done. But I think we covered a lot today, Ryan. And
we covered so much ground.
I hope everyone enjoyed it.
It flew by. I learned a lot. Also, next up, like I said, we have Pixie Pugh, whose real name is Ray Belvedere, and she's bringing a new episode for Animation 301, and you get to learn how to use the simple method for creating animated texture loops for your own animations.
Sweet, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you, Ryan. It's always a pleasure
James.
being here with you, man.
And we can check out your work on leavethemaptravel.com. And then what's your website?
My website is just jamesbonanno.com. You can find me on Behance, Instagram. My Instagram handle is jamesbonanno _. So I am all over the interwebs. Shoot me a DM. Let me know how else I can help. And it's been a pleasure being here once again. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today to follow along with my stream.
Yeah, absolutely. And check out his work for both film and for photography, because he likes to cover both. And it's very inspiring and makes you want to travel the world. And I also have so many questions for you about your van. And if you guys have a sawdust toilet, or if you guys packed for weeks or what have you.
Yeah, that'll be the podcast
that'll be the podcast for certain. All right. Well, thank you again also to Voodoo Val for being our moderator. Make sure you give her a follow as well. And I hope you guys stick around here on Adobe Live. There's so much to learn and so much to get to know each other with community. But that's it for us today. My name is Ryan Selvey. You can find me online, Ryan Selvey, pretty much everywhere, Behance, Instagram, you name it. And thanks for watching, guys. Have a great one.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.